Alright, I think it is finally time to paint and finalize this project. Now, it's still not running perfect, but I want to say it's running good enough to where we can paint and finalize this thing, and if we want to further tune this later on, we can always do it later on down the road. So, now we have to do one more thing to the frame before we paint this. We kind of need to readjust the front forks because the trailing angle on the front forks is not as great as it should be, and this thing's fine in a straight line, but anytime I'm leaning into a corner, going around a corner, the steering kind of fights me a little bit. When I lean to the right, the steering kind of wants to go to the right, so I'm kind of hoping that fixing the trailing angle and kind of leaning the front forks a little bit more forward will kind of fix that. All I really have to do that is readjust the neck of the frame as well as readjust the triple trees. Alright, so last night I moved the bottom mount on the triple tree. I moved it forward like almost 1/8 of an inch to make the trailing angle just a little bit more in front of the contact patch of the tire. It's hopefully going to help with stabilization and cornering and all that kind of stuff. But that does mean that the front forks are just a little bit more vertical, so we're going to counteract that by, I want to cut the neck of the frame. I want to cut all these welds, so therefore I can take this whole set, the front forks, the bolts and everything. I want to lean everything just a little bit more forward to get, to get the front forks a little bit more at an angle, because I compared this to my Honda Grom that I have. I compared the front fork angle to the Honda Grom, and the Grom, the front forks are a little bit more at an angle than this is. So I kind of just want to just bring the front forks a little bit more at an angle. That's hopefully going to help even more with stabilization and cornering and all that kind of stuff. But that does mean I have to neatly cut all of these welds except for this one in the back, so I can just lean it a little bit more forward and then re-weld everything. Alright, there goes nothing. Let me readjust this thing on this table because it's a little sketchy. I don't know. Let me move it. Alright, that's a little better. Did it move? That moved it. Alright, so the Honda, I'm trying to go off the Honda Grom because it has, you know, similar scale, it's kind of smaller tires. So the Grom front forks are 66, 67 degrees. And this is the same, 66, 67. It just look, I don't know. It just looks way more angled than the Grom. It doesn't, I mean, you look at this, you look at the Grom, this just looks at way more of an angle. And because we also do have to remember the tire is, the back of the frame is going to be squatting just a little bit more once I sit on it, so it's going to be at more of an angle. So I think let's bring it back to 64 degrees, and we'll call it there. I think that's good. Alright, now I kind of just tacked the front of it, all completely weld this whole thing once this whole frame is disassembled. Now, ideally, I should test it just to make sure it worked, just to make sure it fixed the problem, but I really don't feel like completely putting everything back together. I kind of took apart a lot of the wiring, all the controls, I took off the carburetors, and I don't feel like putting everything back together just to take it up the road, just to test to make sure it fixed the problem, and then to have to disassemble everything again. So I'm fairly confident that it did fix the problem, it works and everything, and or at the very least, it didn't make the problem worse. So let's call it good and let's move on. Let's continue with completely disassembling this whole frame so therefore we can get it ready for paint. Alright, now you guys probably already know this from the thumbnail of this video, but the colors I have chosen to paint this thing is, I want to paint the main chassis red, and then everything else is just going to be painted black. Because I think it'll look pretty awesome, red, you know, red chassis and everything. Because I kind of modeled this thing after a Ducati Monster, and most Ducati Monsters are red and a little bit of black, so I think this thing will look pretty awesome. I may try and paint the engine because the engine has a lot of paint that's like worn away, as well as I took some paint. I took the paint off of the front forks. I don't know if I'm gonna paint these black or I may try and paint them silver to try and match the aluminum gas tank and aluminum swing arm.
I'm glad I was holding on to it. That could have been bad. That could have been bad.
Alright, so we painted everything on here. I did 3 coats of paint on the main chassis and 2 coats of paint on everything else. And I did end up painting the engine. I kind of did a really lazy job with painting this thing. I didn't really cover, you know, protect any, so there's a lot of overspray on some of this stuff, but it's all hidden. You're not really going to be able to see it. Plus, the main thing I did protect is the side covers. You know, just these are chrome, so you don't want to paint over chrome. So, and I used this stuff. This is high heat ultra Rust-Oleum, resists up to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, so it should be, you know, should be fine on an engine. So, anyway, next thing we get to do is finally reassemble this thing and be very careful not to scratch any of the new paint. Yeah, I gotta say, the color choice of this is absolutely perfect. I love the red frame, the silver engine, silver forks. It's kind of matches the aluminum. It's hopefully gonna match the aluminum gas tank and the aluminum battery box that goes underneath this. This thing just looks absolutely just incredible. It's insane how much just a little bit of paint can just transform a project like this. I mean, this thing looked way different to what it used to look like without paint. So anyway, let's start working on the wiring.